Hey guys, it's Mark LeBlanc here, product manager and lead engineer for the AMP L100. I'm gonna go through how to set up your cutting units today to give you the best possible quality of cut on your AMP L100. And we're gonna talk about a few different adjustments. Your reel to bed knife gap, your pitch down pressure that adjusts the pressure of your rear roller and your front roller onto the ground, your height of cut adjustment, and your bed knife attitude. Before doing any work on the machine, you do want to make sure that the machine is fully disabled so that nothing can move for safety reasons. So when you get ready to set your reel to bed knife gap, you're going to want to use a set of feeler gauges. And the two feeler gauges that I'm using today are a 3/1000 of an inch feeler gauge and a 1.5 of an inch feeler gauge. And you're going to start by using your 3/1000 feeler gauge just to get the reel close to the bed knife, but not too close, right? And so you'll want to come on one side of the reel and using your reel adjust knob here, slide that 3/1000 feeler gauge in between the reel blade and the bed knife. And once I feel that 3/1000 feeler gauge get, pretty tight and a little like hard to slide between the reel blade and the bed knife, I'm going to stop on that side and I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side. I'm just going to slide this 3/1000 feeler gauge between the reel blade and the bed knife and slowly tighten the knob until I feel it get snug like that. So now it's kind of snug, I can pull it out. And now I've adjusted both sides of the reel to be about 3/1000 of an inch from the bed knife. Now I'm going to use the 1.5 of an inch feeler gauge. And I'm gonna repeat the same procedure, but instead of doing all of the adjustment on one side and then moving to the other side, I'm gonna go back and forth. So I'm gonna slide my 1.5 feeler gauge in between this reel blade and the bed knife, and I'm gonna advance one click. It still slides freely, so now I'm gonna go to the other side. It still slides freely, and you just keep going back and forth and going one click at a time. Feeler gauge back and forth, and I make my click, and look at that, now I can't slide it back and forth anymore, so I just pull that out. One click, it's still sliding. Two clicks, it stops sliding, and I pull that out. So now that I've gapped the reel to the bed knife with my 1.5 feeler gauge, I can advance my reel adjustment, 2 clicks on either side, 6.5 10/1000 of an inch per click, and that'll get my reel even closer to my bed knife to within under 1/1000 of an inch gap. In some cases, you may even have some light contact on the reel and bed knife, and that's okay. What you want to do now is you want to go into the field and make sure that your reel is cutting grass using your prism gauge. And what you do is you run a test cut and you put the prism gauge down and you see if you have a nice clean cut or not. If you have a nice clean cut across the entire length of the reel, then you're good to go. If you need to make an adjustment to one side or the other because it's not cutting, you can make small adjustments in the field to your bed knife gap or light contact to get a clean cut. So now we're gonna move into our height of cut adjustment and our bed knife attitude adjustment. And I've got my phone here with my height of cut adjustment chart, which tells me for which height of cut and what front roller position I need to use to achieve the correct bed knife attitude, behind center distance, and dip of my reel, which determines how aggressive your cut is. And so today I'm going to try to achieve a height of cut of 400 or 4/10 of an inch and a bed knife attitude of around 4 degrees or 4.5 degrees, which will give me a behind center distance of 0.27 inches. And so I'll do that by adjusting this front roller position to position 3, which means that one of these notches is showing. That means it's in position 3. And then I'll do the rest of the adjustment for dialing in that height of cut in the rear with this knob to adjust the rear rollers. Now, anytime I set my front roller position, as long as I've got my front roller position in the same position on both sides, because of the way that this cutting unit is designed, it's square to the bed knife. So We've tested and verified and engineered this cutting unit to make sure the front roller, when positioned properly, is always square to the bed knife so that you can make adjustments to the rear rollers. And if you have the same height of cut on both sides of the bed knife, your rear roller is also square to the bed knife. So if your front roller needs to be adjusted into a different position to change your bed knife attitude, you can simply use a 17mm wrench and loosen this nut on this side and loosen the nut on this side. And then this bracket ought to move freely. And by rotating it forward like this, you should be able to move it up and down. You might need to loosen it a little bit more. And once you rotate it, you should be able to move it up and down. And you can move it on one side and on the other side, and then tilt it back into the notch that it needs to go in. Once it's in the notch that it needs to go in, you can verify that it's in the correct notch. And then by pinching the top to make sure there's no gap up here, you can tighten this down again. Now your front roller doesn't need to be adjusted that often. The only reason you would adjust the front roller is if you're making really large height of cut changes, like going from 400 to 600 and trying to achieve the same bed knife attitude, or if you want to make your cutting unit cut more aggressively or less aggressively for whatever reason. You can change your bed knife attitude by changing that front roller position and then resetting your height of cut in the rear. So as the pitch of the entire cutting unit rotates forward, the behind center distance increases and the dip of those reel blades below the bed knife tip also increases. Now, this makes it more likely to scalp if you're cutting really, really short. So if you're cutting below 350 or 300, you may have to make your cutting unit less aggressive. And by less aggressive, I mean probably between like 2 and 4 degrees on the bed knife attitude adjustment chart. If you're cutting taller, say above 400, you can get away with running your bed knife more aggressive, above 4 degrees, maybe between 4 and 10 degrees. So the effect this has on the grass is as those reel blades swing through the grass, the more dip you have and the more behind center distance you have and the more bed knife attitude that you have, the lower those reel blades swing into the grass, picking up any blades that might be laying down and raising them before completing the cut. So in a lot of situations, a higher bed knife attitude, more dip, more behind center distance will give you a more aggressive cut and a cleaner cut for conditions that might have blades of grass that are laying down or growing a little bit more horizontally. You can get away with less bed knife attitude if you've got blades of grass that are growing pretty much vertically all the time. And of course you have to go with less bed knife attitude and cut less aggressive if you're mowing really short to avoid scalping. Another thing to keep in mind is that your bed knife attitude and how aggressive your cutting unit is cutting is also based quite a bit on the type of soil and how soft it is. Because if your soil is really soft and your front roller is sinking down into the grass more than if the conditions were firm, then effectively the entire cutting unit is pitching forward, right? And that's not only lowering your height of cut in the actual fairway, but that is also increasing your bed knife attitude, which could cause the cutting unit to want to scalp. So if you've got really spongy ground or really spongy grass and you see that your front roller is really digging down deep into the plant, into the terrain, you may want to run your bed knife attitude a little bit less aggressive to avoid having it scalp the ground. So now we're going to set our height of cut by using the rear roller adjustment to fine-tune that height of cut now that we've already set our front roller to the position that it needs to be in. And we're going to start off by cleaning our rear roller and our front roller to make sure there's nothing under here that could affect that measurement using the gauge. And I found the best rag to do that with is a tie-dye rag. And then we're also going to pass that rag over the top of the bed knife to make sure that it's also clean, so that there's nothing hanging on at the top that would affect the measurement that we use with our gauge. Once I've cleaned that rear roller and front roller and the top of the bed knife, I'm going to try to measure this height of cut across the two rollers and the bed knife about 1 inch away from the edge of the bed knife by just putting this gauge here, engaging the magnet, and then I'm going to move this above the bed knife, and I want to make sure that it comes down on its own by tapping it like that. And I'm going to see that my height of cut is currently set at 420, and I want to go to 400. And so I would make 2 clicks of adjustment here to bring that to right about 400. You don't want to make too many clicks of adjustment on one side before also adjusting the other side. You can make 1 or 2, but try to avoid doing more than 2 or 3 clicks of adjustment on one side before adjusting the other side, because you can put these tubes in a bind by doing that. So now that I've adjusted the left side, I'm going to go make the same adjustment on the right side. I'm going to start by moving my reel out of the way so that I can get this gauge in the correct place. And by looking at the gauge, I can see that it's at 410. And so I just need to make 1 click of adjustment. And now it's at 400. So now the adjustment that we're going to make, now that we've made our height of cut adjustment, we're going to adjust this pitch spring and the down float of the cutting unit. Now what that means is the cutting unit, as it goes through the ground, is able to pitch to conform to the undulating terrain of the fairway. And so as the cutting unit pitches down, this spring is going to compress, and as the cutting unit pitches up, the gap in front of this bumper will shrink. And so we're going to set both of those. Now it's really important to remember that before you can set those, you have to set your height of cut, and then you have to put the cutting unit down on flat ground. So a shop floor or something really flat is best for setting this. And you don't have to set this very often, because if you make really small height of cut adjustments, say 50 thou or less, this isn't really affected that much. This is mostly needed when you first get your machine, or when you make really big height of cut adjustments, or more importantly, really big bed knife attitude adjustments. That's when you'll need to reset this and make sure it's set properly to make sure that you have the correct amount of down float for this rear roller to go down as the cutting unit needs to pitch up, and so that this spring is set properly to apply the correct amount of down pressure to the rear roller that keeps the front roller from really digging in too much as it pitches down. And we're going to start by setting the gap between this washer and this front bumper, which is going to be what sets how much down float your rear roller has to accommodate undulating terrain. And so we're going to do that by loosening this nut here, and then using my 2 wrenches, I'm going to stick those. I'm going to loosen up this, and then I'm going to set my gap to where there's about 2 wrenches worth of gap underneath between this washer and this front bumper here. And so right now it's a little bit more. I can tighten this just a little bit, and then check it again, and now I'm right about 2 wrenches thick of gap between this washer and this bumper here. And so now I'll tighten this nut back up, and now my down float is set. You do need to set your down float on both sides of the cutting unit to be the same, otherwise one will restrict the down float more than the other. And so once you've set the left side, then you need to set the right side. As I stated before, this is not an adjustment you need to make very frequently. This is an adjustment you only need to make if you make large changes in your bed knife attitude or your height of cut. Other than that, really small changes to the height of cut using just the rear roller adjustments do not require you to make an adjustment to this spring or this down float. Now the last thing you need to check when trying to achieve a really good cut on your fairway is the amount of down float that the decks have and that's based on how much slack is in this belt here. Down float is what gives this belt slack when the cutting units are on the ground, and the slack is what allows these cutting units to go down beyond the ground position that they're at nominally. So as you're going up and down hills and over undulating terrain, the cutting unit needs to go further down. The more down float you give the cutting unit, the more slack will be in this belt, which allows it to adapt to the terrain better. So typically the setting from the factory is good enough for most golf courses, but if you have a special golf course with really aggressively undulating terrain, you might need to increase that down float position on the machine control panel to give these belts more slack so your cutting units can go down a little bit more in those really like steep hills. So this concludes today's video of how to set your cutting units up for achieving a really high quality of cut. As always, the truest test of quality of cut is how it looks in the fairway. So we've designed the cutting units to make them really easy to adjust in the field to achieve, you know, level height of cut across all 5 cutting units and a really good quality of cut using your bed knife gap adjustment in the field. So feel free to make those adjustments in the field as necessary to achieve the quality of cut you want.